Well, g'day everyone. I'm Mitch Docker, your host, and welcome to Life in the Peloton, presented by MAAP. Well, let's rewind a little bit, guys. Let's go back to June, because it was the 24th running of the Unbound Gravel. And we were treated to some great racing this year in both the men and women's elite races, where we saw our old mate from Life in the Peloton, Lockie Morton, take out the men's 200 mile, and Rosa Klöser, in her first edition of Unbound, win the 200 mile. We also saw the elite women have their own start time with a good gap before the rest of the competitors started, so they would have a fully uninterrupted race, and that's exactly what we saw. Such an exciting race. The gravel scene has exploded, as you know, over the last 10 years, and it's a big thanks to Unbound Gravel. This event attracts thousands to the small town of Emporia in Kansas to take on a range of distances that they've got on offer. And look, in the last few years, we've seen the development of gravel. We've now got the UCI World Gravel Championships and also the Lifetime Grand Prix that's kicked off in the US. A brand new off-road series comprised of 7 iconic races of varying terrains. They've got mountain bike, they've got gravel, and of course, the Unbound is involved in that series as well. Now, just after Unbound last month, I was lucky enough to sit down with both this year's winner, Rosa Klöser, and Hayley Smith, who finished just behind her in 4th place, to fully unpack this year's edition and also what a phenomenon Unbound Gravel really is. I tell you what, it was such a treat to have them both on the pod at the same time and listening to their stories and watching their reactions as both of them sort of unpacked and talked about the events that happened in this year's race. We also get a chance to chat about the Lifetime Grand Prix. Like I said, a brand new series that started 2 years ago where we saw Hayley win the inaugural series back in 2022. And guys, look, in this spirit of gravel, yep, here at Life in the Peloton, we've got wrapped up in it too. We are launching our very own multidiscipline gravel event this year on October 12th, 13th, here in Lancefield, Australia. That's right. If you're listening to this around the world, it's time to get on and book your flights and get yourself out for the Specialized Dirty Docker. This is so exciting. Look, I've had this idea since returning to Australia and getting around and checking out all these gravel events. And then, of course, doing all the random exercise that I do, from cross-country running to gravel to cyclocross. Well, I've got them all combined and they're all in the Dirty Docker. It's a weekend full of great stuff, something for everyone. Plus, Saturday night, pitch a tent, roll your camper in and stay the night. Kick back in front of a fire pit, listening to live music, a cold beer in hand, sit back in the Fiesta Village and catch up with old friends. That's what it's all about at the Dirty Docker. Well, now, Rosa Klöser, she's a 28-year-old from Germany, and Hayley Smith, a 30-year-old from Canada. They're both privateers with MAAP, and they've gone away and they've developed the specific Women's Privateer Pro Jersey, the RK Pro Jersey by Rosa Klöser, which salutes those seeking to make their mark, gunning for podiums, and persistently chasing progression. And then the HS Pro Jersey by Hayley Smith, that salutes those harnessing their mental grit to continuously accelerate beyond. Now, both designs are very, very cool with ultralight, performance-driven fabrics and are designed to inspire to perform at your peak. Where, look, a percentage of these sales of these custom jerseys are going towards supporting both Hayley and Rosa's ambitions, both on and off the bike. They're really cool, guys. Look, at least go across and check out these designs. Head across to maap.cc and check it all out. Look, there's lots to chat about in this episode, so sit back and enjoy. Here we go, Rosa and Hayley. Well, should we kick things off here? Girls, we have a very special podcast here today. We've got Rosa Klöser and we've also got Hayley Smith, fresh from Unbound Gravel. Girls, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us both on. It's going to be fun.
Yes, exactly.
Well, let's get right to it. You heard me talk about it, but maybe everyone doesn't know what I'm talking about. Unbound. 18 years ago, it started with 36 people. Today, 5,000 participants compete over all distances. It starts and finishes in Emporia, Kansas, United States. World Premier Gravel Grinder event, they call it. 325k, 10,000 feet, 3,000 meters of vert. North to south courses exist, but in 2024, the north course was tackled. I want to jump right to the 131 mile point, 17 miles from the second checkpoint. Rosa, I'm going to jump straight to you. What happened at that moment?
Yeah, I think you're referring to the moment where I had a little bit of an issue, you could say. So unfortunately, until then, I think it was all great, and we were already in a very selective group. I think at this point we've 11 strong ladies at the front, all together. And at that point, we hit a pretty rocky, big, chunky descent. I went into it maybe a little bit too motivated, being happy to be in this great front group, and hit a really big stone and kind of like lost all air in my front tire like right away, and also tumbled. I'm not sure, please, Haley, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think unfortunately I actually sent it right in front of you. So I think you were kind of like the person who had even to go around me when I hit the deck. But fortunately, while I did actually hit my elbow quite significantly, I didn't realize it at that moment, so that was good. So I jumped right back on the bike, and fortunately didn't lose the group at this point. But once I was back on the bike, I of course realized that my front tire was pretty much flat. But luckily I was running inserts, so I could stick to the group for a while at least.
Haley, I want to jump to you because this is pretty epic, because Rosa's got a flat tire. She's trying to get back to the group. She gets back to the group, and I'll come back to you, Rosa, in a second, because this is also, I'm skipping over a whole lot of really good stuff here, but I want to jump to 15 miles to go. A little bit further on, there's still 9 riders in the group, and the gap is back about 10 minutes, I guess, to the second group. I don't know that exactly. I've sort of worked that out and spoken to a couple of different people. I don't know if that's correct. You can tell me. But what's the dynamic in the group right now? Rosa's come back. She's had a flat. Suddenly she's back in the group. You've got 9 ladies there sort of going on to the finish, but the dynamic's sort of changing a little bit. What's the feel? 15 miles to go.
Yeah, so we didn't actually know how long the gap was. The most intel we had was that at the previous checkpoint, which was with like 90K to go, we knew that we had about 8 minutes, but we also knew that we'd kind of been messing with each other, and there'd been quite slow periods in this last chunk of the race. So we didn't know if the gap had closed, and we knew that pretty motivated people were chasing behind us. So within the group, well, I should preface this with my mindset. So I wasn't well heading into Unbound, and I actually wasn't sure I was going to start until like 20 minutes before the race went. And then my goal was to just get to the first checkpoint and see what happens. Like I was prepared that I might have to pull out. So at this point I was like, wow, I can't believe I'm still here. Like I'm actually going to be able to finish 300K today. So I wasn't in the mindset of like, how do I win? But I was in the mindset of let's like make sure we don't get caught. That would suck if we got caught. So that was my mindset in the group. And I was trying to like work through and drive the pace a little bit. And I would say about 70% of the group, 60% of the group was in that mindset. Like, let's drive it. We do not want to get caught. And we are still working as a team. But then there were a few other people who were disruptive, were kind of like either slowing it way down when they got to the front, whether from fatigue or tactically, I don't know. And a couple people that just like were not doing any work and were already racing against each other, which was frustrating when you still have whatever that is, like 25K to go, and you don't know like who's coming back up the road.
Rosa, so what happened then? You punch it. You're riding this insert. You get to the feed zone, or the checkpoint, I guess it's called. You get the wheel change. So how do you get from where you were at 17 miles to go to 15 miles to go when there's 9 riders back together?
I asked myself this question as well, but I guess like I had such great support. I need to like highlight that once again. The wheel change, I must say that I got in this feed station or stop checkpoint went so quick that I think from the changing of the wheel or the tire alone, I only maybe lost around 30 or 40 seconds. So in total, I was down maybe by a minute 45 to 2 minutes around that time. And I actually asked in the feed zone, how far out am I? And I got told 2 minutes. And then I was like, okay, wow. 2 minutes, 9 really strong riders at the front, basically all the lifetime Grand Prix legends still in there, maybe like one or two people missing that I would have assumed to be there, but like pretty much like the people that I would have thought would be in the front were in the front. And I was like, wow, that's going to be hard. But I told myself at that point, basically, honestly, what do you have to lose? Like either you're going to like go pretty hard and try to catch them back, or you're going to finish, I think at that point, actually, we were still 11. So then I would have finished maybe 11th or something. And then I was like, to be honest, I don't care about finishing 11th or 20th. So I was like, let's just go for it. You know, what do I have to lose?
Well, let's fast forward then to when you came to that and the group, you got back to the group and you thought, okay, there's a few people sitting on here. I don't know how far behind the riders are behind. You know, it was about 10 minutes apparently, or whatever it is. So a massive gap. You guys didn't know this. So you're thinking, how come we're not rolling? The pressure. Were you one of those ones wanting the group to work? You know, Haley just mentioned that, hey, let's just stay away from behind, because I'm thinking anyone who's dropped from your group's not coming back. And even if they get back, they're buggered anyway because they got dropped. So they're not a threat. But take me to that mindset, what you're thinking. You've just got back from a puncher. You're just happy to be there. In my mind, I'd be sitting at the back going, hey, girls, I'm happy to be back here. I just had a puncher. You towed me to the finish. Tell me what was going through your mind when you got back to the group, 15 miles to go.
Yeah, I totally get your point, and probably that is what maybe a smart racer would have done, to sit on a little bit more. But at least in my perspective, I was definitely like this mean old German grandma that tried to make the group work, because I had exactly the same thoughts as Haley. Because I thought, okay, I was like really feeling like energized. Like when I made it back to the group, that was really like the second, I think that was like with 30 miles to go when I made it around like back, maybe 25 miles out. And that was really the moment in time where I believed that we could pull this off. That where I thought like, okay, this front group is going to the line. And I was like, okay, to be honest, like I was a bit like starstruck by some of the people that were in this group, you know? So I was like, it's fantastic. Like, this is my first Unbound. If I arrive in this group, everyone is going to be stoked. Like, I'm going to be stoked. Everyone's going to be stoked. I just want this group to like finish together. And for me, honestly, it would have been like shattering and like honestly very demotivating if with like, let's say 5 miles to go, a group on the wheels of like 10 guys would have caught up with us. I think it would have mentally cracked me, to be completely honest. And I was really like determined to not make that happen. Or let this happen. So I was pretty much aligned with Haley on that.
Well, let's keep going forward. Final turn, around about 500 metres to go. You can tell me if it's not, from what I could tell from the footage. Haley, you're in Rosa's wheel. Oh, this looks pretty good. On the outside, on the right side, there's a perfect wheel here. Looks like someone's going to lead you out. Take me through what happens here. You've got Rosa in front of you. You're thinking, I don't know, what are you thinking at this point?
I don't think I was thinking, which is part of the problem. But also, so a few things. One, there's 3 hurdles sort of before you get within the last kilometer. So before you get to the finish line, before you get to the sprint, there's like 3 hurdles. The first one is making it up the last little climb. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it takes about 35 to 40 seconds. And it's like a killer. So in my head, I had to get over that. And I was like super stoked that I didn't get straight up dropped over this hill. But then the second hurdle is being prepared for the reacceleration. You crest the hill, make a right-hand turn, and it's flat for about 300 meters maybe before you make the turn onto the straightaway for the sprint finish. So the second hurdle was not getting dropped across that flat, which I barely managed to do. And then you make that left turn and now you can see the finish, and it's probably whatever that is, 400 meters to the finish. And I was in 5th or 6th around that corner. And I wasn't thinking, like, you're 324 kilometers deep. I sprinted on the hoods, for God's sake. Like, I was not thinking. But I did find myself on Rosa's wheel. I don't really remember it, but when you look at footage, there was a rider that kind of got in between, and I had to go around on the right and I lost the draft, and then I had to cut back in. And that was kind of it. That all to say, like, I did not have a sprint. That was everything I could possibly have. And Rosa just like steamrolled away from us off the front. It was incredible. So no thoughts, some not very tactically savvy sprinting technique for me, but I'm still pretty stoked that I wasn't last out of the group. So I'll take it. But yeah, no thoughts, no conscious thoughts at that point.
Rosa, I want to hear your thoughts coming around this last kilometre and coming up these two little climbs and into the last 400, knowing, of course, Hayley's in your wheel and you want to blow her straight out. That was obviously the plan. Tell me about your last thoughts coming into this. And like you said, you know, not expecting to be here, not even expecting to get back to the group, and let alone when you do get back to the group thinking, cool, I just want to stay away from the rest of these guys who got dropped. I want to just keep pushing. I want to be just in this group.
Exactly. So I, of course, like, I must admit, I am still a racer. So when I found myself in this opportunity group, so with 9 girls remaining, of course, like Hayley just said, of course, I didn't want to get last in the sprint. So even though I was happy to be there, of course, I was like, I'm not going to get last in the sprint, you know? So I was that self-confident. And then, like Hayley said, like I assumed that the hill, this last finish hill would be ridden quite spicy. So there I just managed to, or like wanted to be up front, like over the hill. And my legs still felt quite okay, to my surprise. And I was like, okay. So I arrived on top. And I think then for me, from my perspective, there was actually another element to it. So just before that first right-hand corner, before it then turned left, G from SD Works, she attacked. So I jumped like right on her wheel to kind of like, you know, make sure that she doesn't get away. And then to my luck, or like it all kind of like panned out really good for me, because then Sarah, who also is like racing for Specialized, she still came around G after that corner. So she kind of like let us out into this corner. But what I didn't know, and maybe Hayley had more intel on that because she was like in the group the entire time, is I wasn't really aware that these two were having like a game plan or like racing together. Like, I think I didn't like really expect it. When we entered this like last corner onto the finish straight, I did hear G like screaming really loud to Sarah, go, go, go. And in that moment, I stayed super calm and I knew, okay, great. I'm on like the lead out train. So I was like, of course, a little bit like afraid, because I was like, okay, I don't know how long Sarah can go, but I knew she will work for G. So I was like, okay, that's a good position to be in. And to be completely honest, no disrespect here, at that moment I didn't even think about Hayley because I was focused on Sarah. So I was focused on.
Of course,
like,
she didn't. She was behind you.
Why would you think about people behind you? Not smart.
If she's behind you, that's her own fault.
Yeah. And then I was basically in Sarah's wheel, and I could tell that she was like starting to slow down a little bit. In that moment, I had to make a decision, and it was like very intuitive, I think. So either I could have like continued staying in her draft, but then risking to slow down, or I could use the momentum and go. So then I think I actually opened my sprint quite early, like already with 350 meters to go. And to be completely honest, I wasn't sure if someone like Hayley, for instance, would be on my wheel, but I was pretty confident that I could like get a podium out of it. When I opened my sprint, I wasn't like, confident in being like, I'm going to win this. But like, I was pretty confident I could make like a podium happen. So I was like, just going to go for it. And then luckily I could hold it to the line. Yeah.
It's not lucky. Don't say luckily when you're talking about it.
What I want to do is, Hayley, maybe first I want to rewind a little bit and just, what is Unbound? What is Unbound all about? Like, it's a big question, but I want to hear two different perspectives here because, look, you've been at Unbound before. You've done it. You've been around the scene a little bit. Yeah, we're going to get into Lifetime a little bit later on, but you're a winner of the Lifetime Grand Prix. Let's go straight to Unbound and tell me what is Unbound? What is this big gravel affair over there? What is this beast?
So it is the biggest gravel race in North America, and it has a lot of lore around it. I come at this from two perspectives as both a racer and then also in my academic side gig, I do some research on gravel. So I've had a lot of conversations about this, like what is Unbound? Why is it such a phenomenon? But it's just this like it is the pinnacle. And it's the pinnacle of gravel for professionals, but also in like what society, the North American Cycling Society thinks about gravel as. So like you can't really have a conversation about gravel without Unbound coming up. And for us, for example, so my partner and I come from cross country Olympic mountain bike racing. So like really short stuff, not gravel at all. And before we made this switch in 2022, like we already knew about it. Like we knew about Unbound. We knew about this like mythical event. And my partner Lesby actually had an entry that he had to defer for several years because it always conflicted with a World Cup for mountain bike. So it was on our radar because it's just this thing. It's like this big thing. And I'd say if I had to tell you like what is Unbound about at its core, maybe it's changing in the pro field right now, but it's about community and connection and enduring. And so I think those two things, they find this like perfect like recipe in Unbound with, as in like the people that you're out there with, the people attacking this challenge with you, and just this monumental thing that you would never be able to do on your own. That like people talk about respecting the race, finishing it, enduring whatever comes at you, because inevitably things will come at you. Like, you know, Rosa having to ride a front flat for 30 kilometers, or intense heat, or intense mud, or it's just, I think it's just this monumental challenge that has quite a deep hold on the cycling community in North America.
It's strange that you're saying there's a lot of things that correlate to a race that I loved for a long time and still do love now as a viewer. It's Paris-Roubaix. And, you know, there's a respect about finishing Paris-Roubaix. There's a whole lot of challenges that go into it. And, you know, as you said there's mud, you know, there's weather. And this is all similar things that are around Roubaix. You know, this is one of the pinnacle races in the road scene. And I love that there's that correlation, that it's just this utmost respect about anyone who gets through the event. What I want to hear the difference is now is, Rosa, coming to Unbound yourself and, you know, for the first time. And what did you think about Unbound coming there and sort of unraveling almost the present? It's probably not the right word, you know, like the package, you know, like what is this thing? You hear this build up, and I'm hearing it now. I've never been there myself, and I'm wondering what it is, and to go there and race it and to win it.
Yeah, I think Haley already summarized it really, really nicely. But of course, as a European who's pretty new to gravel, I couldn't really imagine the event or the depth of the event and also what it's all about. Of course, being quite transparent, I had an idea that it was a really important race, especially after last year's winner being German. And I could, of course, trace her development, the life changes she underwent after actually winning Unbound. I had like a sense for the importance of the event. But actually arriving in the US and arriving in Emporia, seeing this expo, seeing all of these people there, and then, to be completely honest, in the end, standing at the start line and seeing the media and like people with the cameras in our face, there I think it was really like in that moment when I saw all of these like strong ladies next to me, but also like this media presence, I think it was when I really understood like, okay, this event has a lot of like respect, but it has of course also a lot of importance. And I think before you've been there and you've felt it, and maybe even have been a participant, you can't really acknowledge or understand the event. And I must also say, like, it was a really long day out. So to everyone who manages to finish this, I think it's incredible. Independent if you're like now an elite racer or like just a normal participant, I think just to endure it. And I think in like 10 and a half, 12 hours, however long you need, there's so many thoughts going through your head, and not to have like a moment of weakness or like a moment where you be like, oh, I rather would be like at home now. I think that's quite hard to not endure this. So I think yeah, I think it's really impressive to just finish this. And I actually want to add in a little fun fact here. So I would argue maybe in this year's Unbound edition, Haley, myself, and our two partners, we might have actually qualified as the two fastest couples. Funnily enough, after the finish, we realized that I think at least for the later part of the race, our two boyfriends or partners, husbands, they were sharing the race and they were actually sprinting it out at the end. The situation actually, Haley's partner took the win over my boyfriend, but I think it was quite nice story that both on the female side and on the men's side, we kind of shared the race together.
Is that right, Haley? Have you got any comments on that?
We just discovered this when we were waiting for the award ceremony the following morning. No comments. I just think it's a funny parallel, and it's maybe a commentary on how gravel racing is in North America, that like everybody is out there sharing things at the same time. And even though we were in completely different races, there's a level of connection there. There's a level of connection that Andrew, my partner, and I experience, like, because we had the same experience, even though we were doing it like an hour apart or whatever. So that's one of the cool things about this race, is that no matter where you are, you can connect over all other 5,000 people because you're doing it together, even though you're not, you know?
Rosa, I want to ask also, and I think Haley too, you'll have a nice comment on this, but something slightly different is that, Rosa, you're very new to the sport. You know, I think it's 3 years since you've been riding a bike, you know, maybe 2 years in the gravel scene. And from what I understand, you can tell me if I'm wrong here, what I've noticed is even in the preparation to Unbound and then following Unbound, what has the race given you? Physically and maybe mentally too. I think mentally maybe even more. This idea, it's unlocked this sort of ability to go, hang on, I'm super strong. I actually get it now, you know, because look, I just want to set the perspective here. In the last 6 weeks, 12th of May, you're second at the World Series in Germany, the Gravel World Series. You go to Unbound on the 1st of June, you win. Just after Unbound, couple of weeks later, you head down to another World Gravel Series. You finish second in France. You just decide to put the skinnies on and go to the German road race championships and finish top 10 there as well. So this 6-week period for you, for a new cyclist coming in, this is high level stuff. This is, you know, it's not just one race out of the blue. This is a compact 6 weeks of intense, really good results. Tell me what Unbound has sort of unlocked, maybe physically or mentally. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. Initially, when you asked me, I wanted to just answer one word and wanted to say fatigue. But I think on the other hand side, on the upside, of course, it's also belief, of course, and trust in the process and in myself. Because full transparency, at the start of the season, I did have this feeling of missing out. Everyone was already out there racing their bike and doing super well. I was like tracking like the races that the ladies did over in the US, like the Lifetime Grand Prix series started, all of these like Belgian waffle rides. And then in Europe, we had like La Santa Val and like a few of these like gravel races where like the big hitters already started to show like, their level. And I wasn't part of it because next to racing, I'm also pursuing a PhD and I had like a lot of work commitments. So I had to actually make the decision to kind of postpone the start of my season to a little bit later. And then basically keep training, keep calm, and like, you know, wait for my day to start. And I think, of course, like, as you mentioned, like with the UCI World Series in Aachen, I already had like a really great start because I actually came second to no one less than Lucinda Brandt, which I could live with easily. And so then when I lined up for Unbound, of course, I would lie if I would say that I would have thought that I would win it on my first shot. But of course, winning it in the end gave me, of course, like some trust and some belief into the strategy that I'm following, that it's going to plan and that it's going well, and that I did improve on some of the areas that I wanted to improve from the last year. Yeah, of course, like, I mean, to be honest, also, like, I think while there were like a few things that were really stressful leading up to Unbound, in the end, like also with the great result of my partner, I think it was still like a fantastic week. Like I loved it. Like, of course, like maybe I would have said differently if I would have gotten last, but that's us human beings, right? So like now, of course, in retrospective, I'm thinking we had a nice house with so many nice other athletes. We just had also like a good time while we were in the US. And we actually took time. We went to the expo, maybe because I wasn't in this stressful situation where I felt like I had to perform, right? So I actually went to the expo. I tried like some relaxation boots and I talked to people there. I just had like a good time also. So in the end, I'm connecting a really good experience with Unbound, and that probably gave me the fuel or the motivation to keep going now for the upcoming races. And of course, then my little exploration on the road now at German Nationals this last weekend was also super cool, just because in the German road racing scene, we do have a lot of elite World Tour riders, and to be able to race against them and just like experience some road racing was just another highlight.
I can imagine yourself, Haley, as one of the old racers. When I say old, I mean in terms of experience, not as in age. There's a few things out of that I want to talk about, because firstly, sitting there hearing that, I'm thinking to myself, I wish I could get myself into that headspace. Going into a race, there's only a certain period of your life before you understand that, you get too serious, you get too sort of fixated on it all, and you can't, even though you want to relax, you want to go down to the expo, like Rosa said, you want to literally be exactly who she is, but you're being a fake person. You want to do that, but you're trying to do that, but realistically, you're not wholeheartedly doing that, because you're like, I should be back home. I should be resting. I've got the big race tomorrow. You've got your legs up. There's that element of it too. And I want you to sort of put it in perspective too, because this is, I think, is really important. The Lifetime Grand Prix. It's not just one Unbound for you. You're in this series. So it's a big question I'm trying to ask you here is, try and get your head in the headspace of Rosa and help us understand how she's able to do that, not only as sort of a green rider in a really good way, fresh and just understanding the scene, but also not being involved in the Lifetime Grand Prix, as good as and as bad as that can be. Good because she gives you that freshness to go for that race, that one race, and attack it and not worry about the whole series, but also as bad because you're not in this series. So it's a big sort of question there.
Yeah, I have a few different thoughts on it. So first, I'm in the Grand Prix. I won it the first year and I was third last year. It's a nice thing, but you can't think about it because it spans from April to the end of October. It's 7 events. Because you can drop 2 in your overall standings, the standings don't really mean anything until there's many races under everyone's belt in the series. And it's just, I've never been a racer that can focus on the overall. That's just not how I can do it. I have to approach every race like a single disconnected competition. So I just don't think about it. I don't think about the overall. It's not, it just doesn't factor into how I approach races at all. I think that when you mentioned being a green rider, and I think one of the things that was always talked about when I was in Olympic mountain biking is that you see this with people at the Olympics. So at their first Olympics, they're super excited and they're just wide-eyed and optimistic. That wasn't my experience, but in general, that's what people come to it like, and they do great. And then at their second Olympics, they are burdened by the pressure to perform. They've done it before. They feel that now there's an expectation on them because they have the experience, and they underperform. But then at their third Olympics, they arrive there going, I know what this is. This is bonus. I can't believe I'm here for the third time. Let's just see what happens. And then it's
a rarity.
Yeah. And then they do great again. And I think that's kind of where I'm at. So I almost share the perspective that Rosa has, being I did my 10 years in cross country mountain biking. I sat in a lot of hotel rooms the week leading into World Cups in the most beautiful places in the world that I never saw. And my thing with gravel is that I refuse to do that. If I'm going to do this as a career and as a pursuit for now, I have to enjoy it, or else I'm not doing it anymore. So I kind of share Rosa's perspective on it. And I think I'm able to do that because I've been in cycling for so long, pretty new to gravel, but in cycling so long. And because I just don't think about the overall series. Like I said, sorry, it's important and I'm in it for a reason, but I don't think about the leaderboard.
Just quickly give us a wrap up of what the series is, because, if anyone listening doesn't know what the Lifetime Grand Prix is, you being a previous winner of it, it's a relatively new series. It's a pretty unique thing as gravel's sort of exploding.
Yeah, so the Lifetime Grand Prix is North America's premier off-road cycling series. There's quite a large prize purse, but it's only offered for the overall. So these individual events don't come with a prize money purse. It's just for the overall standings. And it includes 7 events, 4 of which are gravel and 3 of which are mountain biking. They don't include much single track, but you do ride mountain bikes at them. And they're all quite long.
Horrible.
Yeah. So like the shortest race is Schwamigan in Wisconsin, and it takes about 2.5 hours, and then Unbound being the longest. Yeah. And I think there's maybe 35 participants in both the men's and women's field. And the prize purse is $30,000 US for the win. So it's a pretty big chunk of cash. And that's motivating for some people. But yeah, and it just takes you all over the US and to iconic events like Unbound, Leadville, Sea Otter. Yeah, I'm not sure if there's any other info I would share, but.
You mentioned $30,000. Like, it seems like a lot, and it is quite a lot of money, sure. But spread that out over the whole year, and being a privateer, as both you ladies are, it's a unique new sort of thing in this gravel world. Look, I'm not saying that didn't exist beforehand in, let's say, trail running or, mountain biking, whatever it is. You supported yourself. It's a new thing, I guess, viewed in, coming off the back of road cycling, because, road cycling is all about teams. So with this sort of gravel scene and alternate scene, we've created this term, the privateers. Rosa, can you explain a little bit what that is about? Because I don't really exactly know. Is it supporting yourself? Have you got sponsors? You go out and search your sponsors. Is it reliant on prize money? How does it all work? Are you guys teammates? Because you both are under, similar sponsors. You both ride for MAAP, yet you've got different bike sponsors. Was that a lead out? I saw at Unbound that Haley couldn't actually hold the wheel.
No, it wasn't for disclosure. So, I mean, of course, to be honest, being like under the same privateer connection with MAAP, of course, I mean, I don't need to make a secret. Of course, I would have loved for Haley to get second. But I wouldn't have complained if she would have gotten second. And I would have been extremely happy for her. But it's not like we're official teammates. But of course, like I think having the same sponsors and maybe at Unbound, having some of these pre-race meetings or events, of course, allows you to get to know some racers better than others. So, of course, I talked way more to Haley at Unbound than to some of the other ladies in that front group. And, of course, for that reason, I would feel more happy just by connection and by knowing a friendly phrase for her to be up there in that group, of course. But yeah, in general, I think the privateer model, and I'm also like happy to hear or interested to hear what Haley has to say about that, because I do think that there's still like some slight differences between the European privateer model maybe and the US privateer model. I would, for instance, be super curious to hear her thoughts on the Trek Driftless collective that she is in. Because for me, that like as an outsider does seem a little bit more team-ish than maybe like what we have with the MAAP privateers or also some of the other individual sponsors. But in general, I think when I started getting into like the world of gravel and understanding that this option exists to be a privateer, I was told pretty much at the start, it's basically the same as what has existed for a long time in triathlon. If that makes sense, maybe that's like an easy bridge for a lot of people. So in triathlon, you're an individual athlete as well, and you have your like individual sponsors that support you. And the support can, of course, range from equipment sponsorship deals over to financial contributions, up to sponsors that are unrelated to the cycling or to like the sport itself, but they can be like financial contributors. So because I have been like still very much focused on my PhD this year, I would say I started this like light privateer option. So I do have a few sponsors, but I could have probably like invested more time, or some of the ladies in the US that do this full time, and they have to fully live off it. They of course require more significant support than I required this year, just due to the fact that half time I'm still like doing my PhD and I'm still having like an income flow from that. So me actually collecting all of that money wasn't like the utmost priority.
Off the back of that, Haley, I'd like to hear your thoughts because both of you are studying, and it's quite a unique thing in female professional sport. I only can reference female cycling. Is that you're all educated, very well educated, and you make it work in both, and you clearly make it work in both. Like there's the old theory that you got to choose one or the other, but hang on, we're making it work. So tell me a little bit about what Rosa's talking about with the two differences in the privateers, but then also on that, like what you're getting up to when you're not riding around.
Yeah, so I'll touch on the school element first, and then I'll go back to my perception of privateer versus team. So yes, there are a lot of highly educated women in road cycling and in gravel cycling, and that's because it's extremely new for us to get paid. Men have not had to do that because even if you're finishing, like even if you're not on world tour, you're making a livable salary. Not the case for women. You see a lot of like women with PhDs, masters, etc., who have come from other careers that, and this has been born out of necessity. So I just finished my master's, and my PhD is just starting right now in sports psychology. Like Rosa said, I don't rely solely on my cycling income to fund my ability to live, which is nice because it means that my sense of self is spread out. My sense of self is not dependent on only my results. So that's pressure relief in itself. But yeah, I guess I'll just leave it at that highly educated women in cycling, very common because of sexism. So we'll move on from that. That's not the only reason. I'm being facetious. But yeah, so with the privateer versus teams thing, you do see some teams like you would see in road cycling. Specialized off-road is a good example. It's very centralized. Athletes do have the opportunity to go for sponsors outside of the factory program that are supplementary, but it is very like in-house. And then you have at the other end of the spectrum, people who are complete privateers. So they source all their individual sponsors. It's really like a one-person show with probably an agent that helps them source these things. They do all their managing, their scheduling, everything. And then in the middle, which I think is unique to gravel, you have this sort of quasi-privateer, quasi-team structure. And I'd say that's where Trek Driftless actually fits in, which is the team that I ride for. These athletes were all sponsored by Trek. It's an in-house program. They do a lot of our logistics and booking. They always send mechanics with us. So when we're at an event like Unbound, it is a professional team on the ground. But we have a lot more freedom to select our race schedule, go for or partner with other brands like MAAP, for example. I had the freedom to start that partnership and like design my own custom kit with them and do those kinds of things. So it's kind of half and half privateer, half professional team model. And it really works for me because with school, I don't have time to like logistic myself. I don't have time to, first of all, learn how to be a mechanic, and second of all, be my mechanic. Like I don't have time for those kinds of things. So this fits my needs very well. And it's actually been really fulfilling because you do get to make those connections with people like Rosa and the MAAP crew. Like I arrive at Unbound and I have my Trek team, but then in that front group of 9 women, I have other teammates as well. So there's other ways to like, you get to share in more people's success, which is kind of fun. And yeah, your community, your circle of people that you are positively connected with instead of only being competitive with is expanded. And that's pretty nice.
I want to bring it back to, and you mentioned a couple things there that are really cool, like your positive mentality. It's something you really focus on, from what I understand, and that sort of narrative around sort of the mindfulness around elite sport, because it can become very consuming. And this, and I'm only assuming, Rosa, and I could be completely wrong, but that it's a beautiful thing when you start your career in a certain sport. And I try and think back to the original times when I started racing, and I looked down upon young guys coming in. I was like, oh, this is so beautiful. You guys don't even know the limits yet. You can just, you're free of your mind. You're just racing and just doing things you don't know yet. And it's great. You know, you're blowing up, trying to go across a break that you don't know. And you're just fearless, you know, and the experience is a great thing. It allows you to become a much more mature, you know, let's talk about cycling now, mature cyclist, and you understand how the race is going to go, but it holds you back in a way. Hayley, tell me a little bit about the sort of the mentality stuff and, you know, something you've been exploring and working on, especially coming to a race like Unbound, which it is a massive beast, 10 hours out there. And maybe it's not exactly that, but the way you go about approaching races now.
It's different for every race. Unbound is 10 hours on a good year. If we had had a mud year, it would have been so much longer and so much worse. And you have to be prepared for that. So I can't concisely say how you go about approaching these races mentally because there are so many things that go into it. But I will say that your mentality is a daily practice. It's something that you practice in training and in life. And there's a lot of different elements that go into that. But I'll just give you like a specific example for Unbound. So one of our team managers they made custom stickers for us. So at the beginning of the year, we like submitted phrases that were important to us, mantras, etc. And he had these made into little stickers that we could put on our bikes. And so the one that I chose for Unbound and what I had to use as my tether or my anchor was "It's all gravy." So I had that on my stem, and I didn't have any like race notes. I didn't have any course notes on my bike. That was the only thing I saw. So every time I look down and you have those thoughts of, I don't know how I'm going to get to the finish line, or I wish I wasn't doing this. If those thoughts do creep up, you have that reminder that brings you back to the headspace that you wanted to create or that you're hoping to manifest. And so that's probably the most like widely applicable thing that I can share is that like mantras really work for me. So I use those in training all the time. But yeah, Unbound, it's all gravy. And that probably meant that I didn't have the fire I needed in those last 30 kilometers, but it also was the only way I got to the finish line. And it helped me race with gratitude all day because I wasn't sure if I'd get to do it.
That's right. Like you may not have got to the finish line if you didn't have that mantra there, yet maybe you didn't have the punch that you needed, but you know, you needed that mantra to get you inside that last, you know, 9 ladies there. Rosa, can you, or maybe you already have one, listening to that, is there anything that you sort of go, oh, hang on, maybe I need one of them, or maybe I didn't. Maybe I just had one going subconsciously anyway.
Yeah, definitely. I'm actually a big believer of mantras or actually visualization myself. My grandfather on the side of my family, we have like a long history of this. So my granddad, he was actually a rhetoric coach. So I kind of like already like grew up with this mindset that you have to kind of be quite focused, but then also use mantras, use visualization to kind of like stimulate yourself and also create self-belief. And I think one mantra or like one sentence that I've been like maybe struggling with last year when I started racing, when really strong elite riders that had been racing for years showed up on the line, is that I had this feeling of like, I don't belong here because I'm newbie, you know, why should I be able to race with, for instance, Marianne Vos? Like that, there's no way that this is right. So I think this mantra of I belong is really something that like actually keeps me going. So these days when I stand on the start line, I tell myself I belong in this front group. I like have a right to be there, and I am strong, so I should be there. It shouldn't be a surprise to me. And I think this is something that keeps me going or keeps pushing me. Yeah.
One thing that I really loved about Unbound this year, not that I've been tuning into it for years and years, but definitely in the last few years, is that the separate start time for the ladies. The elite men went off, 5-minute gap, then you went off, and then there was a good substantial gap. Enlighten us sort of, and Hayley or Rosa, I feel free of either of you to jump in. Enlighten me sort of how that's differed from years before and how that's differed from a lot of other races. Look, I've experienced it too, you know, here in Australia where the women start with the men as well, and they get a draft, and they're in there till they get dropped, or they go in a different group or whatever it is. Tell me how that's really different and how that really changed the race this year, and made it, in my opinion, a much more exciting race to follow as a spectator.
Maybe I'll jump in here just because I did do Unbound the previous 2 years where we didn't have this separate, real separate start, but it's a completely different sport. I won't even say a different event or way of racing. It's totally different. So when we start with the men, like we did at Unbound in my first year, it is so hard because you're with all the pro men and all the masters men. And no matter what wheel you're on, the person in front of you has 100 or 200 extra absolute watts. So when you're in the draft, you're not actually in the draft. You're still absolutely pinned. And then add to that the fact that all those masters are mixed in there. And they're typically the group that you end up hanging on, like the front pro men miss us, but they don't necessarily have the handling skills. And they're also really excited to be around in the pro women and trying to fight for the pro men. So it's terrifying. It's dangerous. So many crashes when we're all mixed in together. It's chaos. Whereas when we get our own start, your brain actually comes into play. So it's not just a legs game. It's not just a who can jump onto the fastest man's wheel and then stick. It's you're racing each other. It becomes a sport. It becomes like a game. And that was I loved it. It was so awesome. It made me wish that I could try road racing. It was just fantastic. So yeah, completely different. And at Unbound, we didn't get caught by the age group or the amateur group behind us. And we did catch some of the pro men, but for the most of it, we were just racing each other, and that's the way it should be, because before it just hasn't been like that. We haven't really been racing each other.
What are you thinking now with the races that you're doing and sort of just uncovering all these races coming? I get that this is a new, nice feeling. I'm sure you're doubling up in a couple of races now, but a lot of these races are brand new. What are you sort of feeling now, looking forward with Unbound in the legs, with these gravel World Series in the legs? What is the future holding for Rosa coming up? I think Haley's sitting there going, "Oh no, here we go. We're uncovered this diamond in the rough." She's going to take, just crushing every race coming up. What are you thinking now? I see you shaking your head there. What's the plans now going forward?
Yeah, maybe before I answer this, I actually want to take the opportunity to second what Haley said, just because I think it's so important. And I actually want to go a little bit more aggressive or dramatic about it and maybe devalue my own performance here, actually even. But I think we need to honestly highlight that I would 100% not have won that race if it would be a mixed race after my flat tire in the front. Because if the front girls, let's say I would have been in this front 10 girls split and we would have been mixed up with men, and I would have flatted out and would have required a wheel swap, there's no way I would have made it back to that group. Because as Haley just referenced, those guys, they just do have 100 or 200 more absolute watts than us. And having this draft, especially at the later end of the race where it was a bit flatter, would have meant that I would have needed to push maybe 300, 350 watts average to catch those ladies back. And I'm the biggest fan of Demi Wollering, but I think she wouldn't have even pulled that off, and me for not. So I think this is just me taking this opportunity to say it, because I think this is also something that maybe people that or men that maybe haven't been in a situation like this don't realize necessarily how big this difference is, or how different the sport is, and what opportunities it does create if we are only women. So I've wanted to take that opportunity.
Yeah, beautiful. I like that. It's nice perspective too, because it is difficult to understand, and to hear that firsthand, it creates a much more interesting race. I can only say it from my outside watching the race. It was great. They kept flicking back and forth. I was like, we got two great races going on here. It wasn't mixed in between. But tell me then, how does that leave you feeling coming out of this, and also, coming out of Unbound? I know we spoke about it before, but where's it leave you now sitting? It feels like it's sort of put you on a trajectory to just keep going. The worlds are coming. What are you thinking now? Is it onto the road? Is it continue on the gravel scene? Is it still on the bike?
Yes, for sure, it's still on the bike. No, I'm super excited. So first of all, now, as we mentioned before, today is actually my birthday. So first of all, today I will eat some cake, and I will continue doing that for a couple of weeks, because I think now with all of these events in the legs, I do deserve a little break, and I think it's also necessary and much needed. But I will continue doing a few more UCI gravel races, just because maybe that's also an interesting insight. Like, while the UCI gravel series is not like the lifetime compete that you're like an official member to it, you do collect points. And these points are super important for your start position at the World Championships. So depending on how many points you collect, you will have a preferred start. And from what we know in the European races, at least, the routes they're not like at Unbound, where they're really wide, and actually your start position at the start, at least in my perspective, correct me if you think differently, Haley, doesn't matter as much. At the European races or at the Worlds, it matters so much, because after like 5 or 10K, you're already heading into the first single track. And no matter how strong you are, but if you enter the single track in 100th position, I promise you, after you come out of the single track, you will not be with the front group. So your position does matter. So I'm definitely keeping my eyes on the World Series, just to ensure that I'm not handicapping myself with the start position. So that's one of my goals. But of course, I also want to do well at Europeans and Worlds. And I think doing the road race nationals this weekend, of course, gave me some insights of more VO2 training that is required to perform at the high end. Because of course, like, your preparation for races like Unbound are a little bit different than for a 4 or 5 hour race with the road, with and against the gravel, but also road stars, because they are also joining the World Championships in gravel. So yeah, my training will be a bit adjusted for the second half of the season.
Hearing that, Haley, what do you think about that? Like, she's going to adjust her training and take it up a notch. Lucky she's not stepping into the lifetime. You're safe for that this year. But tell me a little bit about what you're thinking, and about Rosa, about her thoughts. And she's probably going to be hunting the lifetime down next year.
Yeah, we got to get her on the mountain bike. You come over,
Yes.
You come to Canada, and I'll take you through a mountain bike boot camp, and then we can take on the Grand Prix together next year. But yeah, like, I think that's fantastic. Rosa has obviously shown an immense amount of natural aptitude for this sport. And I think anyone who completes a PhD has proven that they have the stick-to-itiveness that you need for success in this kind of thing. So, nice. I mean, the world is just waiting for her. I'm really excited to see where cycling takes her, because she obviously has the drive and the work ethic that's required, and the skill. So I think it's great. Yeah, for me personally, I still split my time between mountain bikes and gravel. So my next 2 months is mostly focused on the mountain bike, which it aligns right with Rosa says. Like, we worked on the durability of the engine for the first half of the year, and now we're working on fine tuning it. So more sharp, more pain in the future in training.
Well, ladies, it's been a very, very quick hour. I can't believe how quick that's gone. It's fun. It's been fun sort of just going back and forth. We've only touched on Unbound and the rest of it, but it's been great touching in, and very nice to meet you online. And I hope we can run into each other maybe down the line at a gravel event. Come out to do the Dirty Docker. It's coming up. Be a great event. You can go for the Dirty Hat Trick, the cyclocross, the run, and then the gravel event. I know you probably don't know what I'm talking about, but you will. You will very soon. So thank you very much for coming on Life in the Peloton, and great to speak to you both.
Yes. Yeah, thanks for having us, Mitch.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed that, getting off the road a bit, getting into the gravel, and talking about the biggest gravel event there is out there, Unbound Gravel. So cool to hear from the girls, and how cool was it hearing them both talk about the race at one time. We'll keep following them. Like I said, go across and check out their custom jerseys at maap.cc. Big thanks goes out to MAAP, of course, our major partner here at the podcast. And guys, like I said at the top of the episode, the Dirty Docker, it's around the corner. Make sure you get your entries in. Head across to lifeinthepeloton.com. Get your entries in. I want to see you at the Dirty Docker. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be running around. I'm going to be drinking a cold beer. So it'd be great to see you at the very first Dirty Docker. Big thanks goes out to you guys who are listening, Red Bricks Media who put this episode together, and of course, the Life in the Peloton team behind the scenes making this podcast happen, but also working hard to get the Dirty Docker up and running. Guys, until next week, I'll have an episode for you then, so take it easy. Cheers. That iconic music in this episode was composed by none other than the legend, Pete Shelley. Cheers, mate.